I've got another awesome project this week with Shalak, one of our artists on Fiverr. We've heard a lot about this character already, but a bingo book wouldn't be complete without him. He's a Burgess, a bard, a fighter, and a father. So rather than talk about his past too much, we're also going to take note of some of the other features of Alden's chief. Get down there, like, subscribe, and ring my bell. Then we'll jump into the patriarch of the Riddell family named Matthias Riddell. Element: Air. Zodiac sign: Libra. Birthday: October 10th, 1256. Age: 32. Blood type: A. Matthias is a former bard that helped fund the building of Alden as a village with a Burgess ticket from his former lover, Sir John. The red tunic he wears is an homage to his time serving in the army, and the light orange shirt beneath signifies his air element, which is usually categorized by light colors, pastels, and a loose, breezy style. Many of the other blondes in Alden are also related to Matthias, including Owen's wife, Fiona, and his sons, Martin and Shane. Cassandra is his wife of 12 years at the start of the show. He carries a sword named Matameo, which means kind, entertainer, and handsome, qualities of the bard that he possesses. His name means gift of God, and is a variant of the name Matthew. And so, all these names, Matthias, Matameo, Martin, if it isn't obvious yet with the commonality of a very special sword, the inspiration behind the Riddell line comes from the series popularized by the late English novelist James Bryan Jacques. This series was called Redwall, and it's a fantasy novel series that takes place in a world of anthropomorphized mice, rats, rabbits, badgers, moles, and other woodland animals. The feeling is very medieval, and it pulls no punches in fighting, war, torture, and revenge. In fact, if you like Secrets of NIMH and Disney's Robin Hood, Redwall is definitely a series I'd suggest. If you already know or are a fan of the Redwall series, I just want to ask one question that you can tell me down in the comments. What's your persona? Don't worry, it's safe to tell me. No judgment here. After all, I'm also a big fan of those works, and that's all I'll say about that for now. In fact, Redwall was originally floated as the last name of Martin and his family. In some earlier versions of Tales of Atonement, such as the pilot book titled Reunited, that's still the name used. Our story and characters have grown a lot since then, but Reunited was a great way to get all of our ideas out in the open, see what worked and what didn't, not only for our readers, but for us as writers too. Now, the cool thing is you can still find copies of Tales of Atonement Reunited on the Barnes & Noble online store, as well as an earlier edition of Monomyth called To Make a Hero. It's funny though, because the making of a hero is literally the definition of monomyth. So just like the hero's journey for which it's based, Tales of Atonement has a habit of coming full circle. Some of you watching might actually remember those books. If you are one, let us know. There was quite a following for Tales of Atonement on DeviantArt, and I just want to let you know we haven't forgotten about those people that inspired us back then. I hope someday all of those will find their way here to YouTube for the entire story and its evolution. One more quick shout out. I know we have a lot of viewers in South America, so we're looking into including subtitles in either Espanol or Portuguese. For now, though, I'd just like to say, Obrigado pelo seu apoyo. I'm sorry, I'm sure that was awful, but we really do appreciate it. But back to this. Having a star sign in Libra that matches his magical element, air, makes Matthias a fairly adept caster. He once mastered the power of his sword Matameo and its ability to produce one of the 7 elements in some form of attack. I'll touch more on that later. A more begging question, I feel, is, does Matthias actually know any bardic magic? The short answer is yes. When he plays music on his fiddle, the notes produce a calming effect that promotes a feeling of unity and hospitality. It's by no means a mind-altering effect, but something subtle and barely noticed to anyone who isn't looking for it. But it's visualized in our story every time he plays. However, as he never actually studied in arcane ways with the bard, and mostly just stuck to minstrelling, he also doesn't do this consciously. He knows that it happens, but tends to remain quiet about it, worried it would make his desire for peace seem disingenuous, or like his skill with music wasn't as good as it is. It's quite the opposite, actually. The strength of his magic is dependent on his skill as a musician, and it's potent enough that with some honesty and intent behind his bow, he can rouse the entire village to dance. Johannes de Grocchio, or in French Jean de Grouchy, was a 14th century musical theorist from Paris. During his life, his claim to fame was the Tristes Arts Musicae, the art of music, which describes the functions of sacred and secular music in and around Paris during his lifetime. Of all types of instruments, Grocchio says the string instruments predominate, and of all the string instruments, he says the vielle is the most prevalent. Grocchio wrote about several principles of music in 13th century Paris that he observed. He divided music into 3 categories: musica vulgaris, music of the people; musica mensurabilis, measured music; musica ecclesiastica, church music. He also discusses music theory and compositional techniques, such as mensural notation and musica fictica. Grocchio takes a scholastic approach in his treatises, rejecting Boethius' threefold division of music into musica mundana, music of the spheres; musica humana, music of the human body; and musica instrumentalis, vocal or instrumental music. Instead, he uses a technique of classification, similar to Aristotle, by taking a taxonomical approach, used in several of Aristotle's works. Grocchio also consults and criticizes the works of many other musical theorists, mathematicians, and philosophers, such as Plato, Pythagoras, Johannes de Garlandia, Franco of Cologne, Nicomachus, and several others. Given that, we thought it would give our bard a more contemporary feeling if he had a stringed instrument that was played with a drawn bow rather than something like a lute or a lyre. And that's where Matthias' 2 most important items came in. These are key to who he is as a character. Matameo, the sword, and his fiddle, simply called Inspiration. It looks like a violin, but if I'm honest, this design is a little anachronistic. There were some types of viol that looked like this, but Matthias' early instrument was something more along the lines of this design. So a violin is actually a 16th century dance instrument. From the 12th to the 14th century, the equivalent was the French viol. This works since Matthias' family came over from Scotland during the Norman invasion in the late 11th century. Their lineage comes from France, where these instruments were made. The sound produced by a viol was similar enough to the modern violin, such so that is the music we use whenever Matthias is seen playing, and why we've mostly done violin music for the backdrop for this project. The violin music for Tales of Atonement, including Dunmore Lassies, Waltz for the Young at Heart, and Across the Sky, was all produced by the violinist Jabberwocky on Fiverr. Unfortunately, they're not available anymore, which leaves us a bit of a loss. So I want to do a shout out to them here and say thanks for everything. I hope we can work together again. Okay, but so how do we get fiddle from VA? It's more than just a rural southern US name for a jazzy dance violin. It actually comes from the English pronunciation of the German fiato. The Spanish called it vihuela. In Italian, that's where we get the term viola. Did you also know it could be played in multiple different positions? This really just seems to relate to a culture of how it was played, or perhaps to produce a different feeling or sound. Any way you put it, 14th century manuscripts from Naples show the VA being played with it resting against the arm in an upright position. This is the most common way, and how we see a lot of violins being played today. Another common way during the 12th century in Glasgow, where our story takes place, had violins played in a downward position and helped with the legs like this. These instruments were actually extremely popular all the way through to the late 1400s, and would sometimes be made with intricate designs, such as the holly leaf shape. Italy is credited for the continued popularity of the VA instruments after the 1400s. The instruments inspired later designs such as the citole, and even the modern guitar. Typically, they were made from ivory or wood, depending on how much money the musician had to justify the materials. A particularly famous example of an early medieval instrument, and the only surviving instrument of its time, is the Warwick citole. This instrument was originally built sometime in the 1290s, but was converted into a carved-top violin in the 16th century for the Earl of Leicester as a gift from Queen Elizabeth I. Now, honestly, I think that's a shame. I wish they had the forethought we do now, not to modify a 500-year-old instrument. Still, this piece of history, like many other cultures' pieces of history, resides in the British Museum for anyone who'd want to still see it. The lighting in this picture is focused behind Matthias, so to that respect, I wanted to do something more heavy on the front of him. I did something similar to this months ago in episode 1, but this is a lot better. With softer lines around the edges with the actual color of the light, he's playing his fiato, fiddle, citole, allegorical instrument for the patrons there. likely all workers of Alden. Visually, Matthias is based somewhere between Liam Neeson and Gerard Butler. He's not really a burly man, but he is strong and capable, despite being one of the oldest parents in this foursome. He's also one of the few characters that keeps consistent facial hair. I don't know what it is, but things like that just don't really occur much during character design. Usually when we do it, it's to denote an older man who's meant to be a mentor or exemplar of positive masculinity, which Matthias definitely is. Now, he may be the main disciplinarian in his household, but he does so without ever striking his children. He still remembers the horrible way his father struck him, justifying the abuse with biblical verses about sparing the rod. And perhaps that's one reason why he's never brought up the church in his village, for fear of that sort of justified abuse going on where he's in charge. Instead, he uses his gift with words and also reasoning to see to it that his boys are well-behaved and polite. Modern-day studies show that this actually does a lot more to foster positive relationships with parents, healthier adults, and children with better communication skills. Harmony is a big part of life for Matthias. He wants to see Alden prosper in a way that creates harmony with everyone he knows. And speaking of people he knows, what are his relationships like with the others in his village? Well, his best friend is Patrick, as he's known him the longest. Remember, the two actually lived together with Olivia when Matthias was in Edinburgh. Next is Ashley Campbell, the village's brewmaster, and their merchant trader. Matthias and Ashley have a relationship of business partners, as much of Alden's commerce goes through those two families. Ewan McNamara is his cousin through marriage, and within the Rose household he is closest with Edna, but still holds Tim as a dear and irreplaceable friend. I just love how happy he looks in this piece. It's like the music is carrying him away as well. I think he shows a good juxtaposition of a kind, gentle man and a rugged Highlander, all rolled up into one really cohesive, memorable character. We also love the voice provided to him by Chris Beatty. You'll hear more of his work in episode 3 this fall. Alright, now there he is. and I'm getting out of here. Once again, like, subscribe, and ring my bell. Or if you'd like to support the channel directly, follow the Patreon link down in the description. There's already a few great people who support us this way. Just look, we have Shadow Fox, Arya Gamari, Charles Tam, Jace Morland, and Lundare Lumen. You've got the chance to see and hear your name up there too. It only takes $1 a month, but you also get access to other bonus content that's only for patrons. Head over there and check it out.